Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Lowland Greenhouse here at Carlton Carnivores. I've got another plant spotlight for you guys tonight, and this is one that I've kind of led up to in some previous videos. We're revisiting the Nepenthes genus again, my favorite group of carnivorous plants, and this is a species that is actually the parent of a hybrid that I talked about in one of my more recent videos. A widespread, very well-known species, and also perhaps one of the more interesting looking pictures of just your standard lowland species, and that is Nepenthes rafflesiana, Raffles pitcher plant. This is a species that was discovered in the early 1800s and described way back then, so it's been known for over 200 years now. It was found originally in Borneo, and later on, of course, discovered that the species is a little more widespread than that. This plant is one of the first that entered cultivation as well. People were very enamored with this very strange, odd-looking plant that grows really well in hothouse conditions that were popular for being recreated in Victorian times in Europe. So Nepenthes rafflesiana is, again, a lowlander. It's found between sea level and roughly 12 to 1,500 meters in elevation, so that's roughly like 3,000 to 4,000 feet in elevation. And it is found in sandy to swampy environments, usually fairly open areas. It doesn't like a whole lot of tree cover. Plants that grow underneath the forest canopy tend to be etiolated and grow a lot weaker than plants that are along forest edges or in more open environments. It is found, again, in Borneo, where it is very widespread, as well as some of the Riau Islands that are between there and peninsular Malaysia. It's also found in Singapore, and interestingly enough, in a small disjunct area on the west side of Sumatra. This species grows to be fairly large. Some of the biggest plants of this species can have vines that are more than 50 feet, more than 15 meters in length, and they have pretty thick, sturdy stems as well once they get up to that size. Very, very robust and woody, sometimes over an inch in diameter. Their leaves are quite elegant. They have a petiole that kind of clasps the stem really closely, and then you'll notice kind of a very thin, fuzzy indumentum that covers around that stem area and also across the bottom of the leaf, and then a nice thin lanceolate to kind of linear shape of the leaf, broad lanceolate. The upper surface loses the fuzz that it has when it's young and becomes very waxy and glabrous. The underside retains that fuzz, and it comes down to a thin, narrow tip where the tendril attaches. And rafflesiana is one of the few species that sometimes produces winged tendrils as well, where those wider edges of the sides of the leaf lamina actually can either continue down the tendril. I have several plants that actually do that myself. This is one of them that sometimes sports that trait. Or the other variation is you have the wings on the pitcher continue up the tendril towards the leaf as well. Both are slightly different looking, both are kind of really funky looking as well. But they're usually a very nice deep green coloration. However, in the giant form of this species, which produces the biggest plants overall as well as the biggest pitchers, often develops kind of a brownish, reddish coloration, particularly in young leaves, and that may be retained on the underside of the leaf as well. So some think that the giant variations of this species may actually be hybrids, displaying hybrid vigor with its very close relative, Hemsleyiana, which I'll talk about in a minute. But there are also some forms that appear to be pure rafflesiana that also reach massive sizes. Now the pitchers, and this is where it gets really distinct from its close relative Hemsleyiana. Pitchers, especially lower pitchers, are usually very, very squat structures. They're nice, round, kind of tubby, and they tend to sit down on the ground. This is variable though. My versions are tubby. They have these big, huge, wide, frilly wings. And then the tubby pitcher that has no noticeable hip, that's a key trait, at least up until you get almost right to underneath the peristome. There's a slight hip right there, and then it transitions to the peristome. Peristome is usually fairly broad. It's either flattened like in most of mine, or it's rounded, it curves into and then outward on either side of the pitcher, the mouth edge, and then continues on a very distinct, very tall neck right up above the pitcher mouth, where the peristome widens again and sometimes forms almost a fang-like look to it, and it's lined with small teeth usually. Those are usually very distinctive in rafflesiana as well. In its relative, Hemsliana, in lower pitchers, they're usually a lot thinner, and the hip is noticeable and usually somewhere between a third to a halfway from the base of the pitcher. So it's distinctive, it's visual. The rest of the traits are fairly similar though. Now rafflesiana can have pitchers that are not so much squat like these ones, but more elongate and taller, kind of almost cylindrical to slightly inverse funnel shape, so it's fat at the base and then it becomes narrower near the mouth. True rafflesiana, though, will almost never have a visible hip other than right below the peristome if it's present. Now, upper pitchers, I don't have any uppers of pure rafflesiana, although I will show an example of an upper pitcher of my rafflesiana cross Hemsliana hybrid. This is one of the giant hybrids that exists that were once traded as pure rafflesiana. The upper pitchers look very similar to these. Of course, they don't have the distinctive hip that is visible in the hybrid here, but upper pitchers are just as impressive, sometimes even more impressive than lower pitchers. Purely funnel-shaped all the way up to the pitcher mouth, where it forms kind of, the front of the mouth kind of tucks upward, and then curves down and then back up into the tall neck of the pitcher. It's got that same broad peristome, big fat lid that the lower pitchers also have. And then the only difference is that in color, the upper pitchers are usually lighter in coloration. But with this species, that can vary because rafflesiana is one of the most variably colored species in the genus. Pitchers can be almost entirely greenish or whitish looking, pure ivory, and this has sometimes been nicknamed variety Nevea, even though that's not necessarily validly published. It may not be a valid taxon because it's just a color variation, and it can vary. It can be that, can be white with a dark peristome, can have very light speckling of reds or browns or purples, or it can be heavily speckled like a lot of mine here, all the way to some variations that are entirely crimson red or deep purplish to black. The peristome similarly can be pale colored all the way to heavily striped or black. So extremely variable in color, and oftentimes you can get the same variations out of the same seed batch. So siblings can go anywhere from Nevea to almost black. Generally, a dark plant will tend to produce more dark offspring, but again, that varies, much like their close relative, or not necessarily close relative, but similarly widespread species that they hybridize with, Ampullaria, that produces Hookeriana, which I talked about in a previous video. So those pitchers on both the lower and upper traps can be big. Now, your average rafflesiana, lower pitchers will be about 20 centimeters, 8 inches tall. The upper pitchers may be up to 10, 12 inches tall. The giant forms, on the other hand, can produce pitchers more than 35 centimeters, so almost foot 14 inches tall, and can hold almost a gallon of fluid, and the upper pitchers can be 45, 50 centimeters, so over a foot and a half in length, and the volume of those can sometimes rival Nepenthes Raja or Attenboroughii, some of the giants of the genus. So those giant variations put this as one of the largest species in the genus. Most of your standard variations don't get quite that big, but they do make up for it, of course, in those interesting colors. This is a species that, because it is a giant lowlander, those vines climb up into the canopy before they will flower, so generally this is a plant that needs to get huge before it finishes its life cycle. Those upper vines reach the top of the canopy, they get exposed to brighter light, and then they produce their flowers. Now, like all Nepenthes, they are dioecious plants, which means each plant is either male or female, excepting rare mutations. So you have to get two of them that are in bloom at the same time, one male, one female. Pollen gets transferred from one to the other in order to produce seeds. They start out very small seeds, of course, like most species Nepenthes, little tiny, looks like wood splinters, and those get spread out by wind and water. They land hopefully in an open area, and usually, like most lowlanders, germinate relatively quickly in a couple of weeks to sometimes up to a couple of months. And then they usually grow fairly quickly for a Nepenthes. Now, this is overall a slow-growing genus. A full-grown plant that has a 15-meter vine may be 20, 30, 40 years old, or if that's a basil that grew up into a new vine, it's a plant that could be around for centuries. So the seedlings, they grow quickly. They might reach a couple of inches across within a year, take up to 2-3 years to actually start reaching sizable maturity, and then 5 to 10 years to reach vegetative and flowering maturity. But they can then be around for many, many years after that. Now, this is a species that is fairly easy to grow if you can provide the lowland conditions that it likes. Now, it will tolerate kind of intermediate conditions if you can only provide that, but you'll see these plants usually slow down very significantly in winter when it's cooler like that. And they won't pitcher as well. Sometimes they'll develop leaf spots and leaf burn from cooler temperatures. They like it warm. So if you can provide conditions that are humid, so they need it 60% plus humidity, and temperatures are between 80 and 95 degrees during the day and dropping no lower than 75 degrees Fahrenheit at night. That's what these guys like. So warm, humid, muggy, just like those lowland rainforests of Borneo. Now, they will grow in your standard Nepenthes mix. I have mine as, with most of my species, in a roughly 1-to-1-to-1 sphagnum moss, long fiber sphagnum, perlite, and then I use cocoa chips at the moment or some other loosening agent. Because this is a species that does grow in what are known as carangas or peat swamps, this is a species that will tolerate wetter, denser soils. It can sometimes be grown in kind of a peat mix, but you'll find you'll risk less root rot if it's in a looser open mix that is just kept very moist. So this is a plant that don't flood it, but you can definitely keep the soil a lot wetter, a lot damper than many other Nepenthes species might like. You can water it before it completely dries out, but like other Nepenthes, it will also tolerate going to the point where the top of the soil is just starting to dry. And so you can treat it like most other Nepenthes as well. It's just one that will be a little more forgiving if you do overwater it a bit. Now, again, those warm conditions are what people usually struggle to give this plant. And then, of course, it gets big. Even like this is still a fairly young plant as far as vegetative growth goes, even though I've had it several years. It just got repotted into a much bigger pot to get bigger. But this is a plant that's going to demand that warm environment and a lot of space. Your average rafflesiana might grow to be 2 to 3 feet across. If you get a giant variety, it might produce a plant that is up to almost 5 feet in diameter and those huge pitchers. And of course, a vine that may grow to 10, 15, 20 feet before it blooms. So it's a plant that requires a lot of space. That does make it hard to provide for these guys long-term. For a lot of growers, you need a greenhouse like this if you want to get them to full-size maturity. But if you got the room, it's a fairly easy plant to grow, and as long as you keep it warm. But if you can't grow the pure rafflesiana, of course, there are a lot of hybrids with rafflesiana out now that can be grown a little more easily. Hybrids tend to be a lot more tolerant of cooler conditions. Crossed with other species, that does make them a little smaller. Hybrids with ampullaria, of course, orbiculata, aka Mirabilis globosa or Viking, are very popular and common in the trade. Crossed with Mirabilis also shrinks it down a little bit. Your common Nepenthes diariana, an ancient hybrid, is a rafflesiana cross in part, and so you might find that. It has some of the traits of this species along with a few others, and it's fairly easy to grow. Does get large though, so keep in mind, No matter what plant you get, if it has rafflesiana in it, you're going to need some decent space. It is not going to be a small terrarium plant. You're going to want room for it to grow. But if you can provide the room, those hybrids or the species itself, certainly worth growing. That is all that I have for this species right now. I will be talking about a few others in the near future here as I go through repotting. One of the next species I'll be dealing with actually is one of the rarest in the genus and one of the most unusual. Weird pictures, weird leaves, weird place that it grows, all of that. So do stay tuned for that. If you enjoy educational videos like this, make sure to like the videos, subscribe to the channel, turn on the black bell so you don't miss anything coming up. Leave comments, questions below the video if there's anything that I've missed or anything you'd like to see coming up, other plants you'd like to see visited. I might try to write that down and get those into the queue here. If you'd like to learn more about the plants that I work with or the animals that I work with and so on, you can visit the website where there's access to the database and blog, carltoncarnivores.com. More information there. And of course, I'm always posting photos and video tidbits and such on social media, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Carlton Carnivores. If you'd like to help support this channel, simply watching these videos and watching all the way through really does help. Those watch hours are hugely important for YouTube channels, but you can also help support in a financial manner visiting the shop on carltoncarnivores.com where you can buy some of the plants that I might have available, seeds, if you're interested in merchandise, or if you're looking for a baby snake, if you want a new pet perhaps, those are sometimes available as well. Otherwise, you can also support as a Patreon member at patreon.com/hcarlton. You'll get access to the videos early there, monthly access to the seed contest that I do for things that I don't have offered in the shop or are more expensive in the shop perhaps. You get a chance at those. You can also donate at Coffee. All the links for these will be in the description below, including other ways that you can help out. But until next time, I'm Hawken Carlton, and this is Carlton Carnivores.